My wife's laughter with the other in our bed broke me. The jazz was playing softly, but the sight of Mia laughing next to Ryan hit like a truck. Two glasses glistened on the nightstand, one with a trace of her lipstick on it. I was blind, but not anymore. This is not just a betrayal, it's a challenge. And I will play it my way. Jake Turner, 34, had carved out a life he loved in the heart of Seattle's Capitol Hill. A freelance cybersecurity analyst, he thrived in the city's vibrant pulse. Ferries gliding across Puget Sound, the hum of coffee shops, and rainy evenings spent in the cozy loft he shared with his wife, Mia. At 32, Mia was a rising star at a tech logistics startup. Her ambition, a quiet fire that lit up every room. Married for 5 years, they'd built a rhythm of small, meaningful rituals. Sunday mornings at the farmer's market, binge-watching true crime documentaries, and dreaming of a future with kids. Their love wasn't loud or flashy. It was steady, like the soft jazz they played on Friday nights, a backdrop to their shared laughter. Their loft was a haven, tucked above a bustling street, with big windows that caught the city's glow. Jake would wake to the scent of Mia's chamomile tea, her sticky notes on his laptop screen. Little messages like, "Don't forget to eat lunch," that made him smile. He'd brew her tea in return, setting it on the counter as she rushed through emails, her focus razor-sharp. Mia's drive was one of the things Jake admired most. She'd worked her way up from an entry-level role to leading major projects, her name now a staple in company memos. Jake, meanwhile, was content in his freelance world, writing code and securing networks for clients he rarely met in person. Their lives fit together like puzzle pieces, complementary and complete. Weekends were their sacred time. They'd bike along the Burt Gilman Trail, rain or shine, stopping at a food truck for fish tacos or hot cider. Evenings often ended with a board game or a puzzle spread across their dining table. Mia teasing Jake for his terrible puns while he laughed at her obsession with organizing the spice rack. It wasn't the stuff of grand romances, but to Jake, it was everything, a quiet, shared life he'd always wanted. He'd watch Mia as she read, her glasses slipping down her nose, and think, this is it. This is home. Their friends envied their stability. After watching others navigate messy breakups or fleeting flings, Jake felt lucky. He and Mia weren't the couple who posted gushing anniversary tributes or splurged on extravagant vacations. Their love showed in the little things. Jake keeping her favorite almond creamer stocked, Mia leaving the porch light on when he worked late. They talked about kids, though they weren't in a rush. They saved for the future, planned modest trips, a cabin in the Cascades, a weekend on the Oregon coast. It was predictable, comfortable, and to Jake that was the point. A life without chaos, built on trust. But even the steadiest foundations can hide cracks. Looking back, Jake would pinpoint the first signs to a Tuesday night in early fall. Mia came home later than usual, her eyes glued to her phone, her usual warmth replaced by a distracted nod. "Work's intense," she said, brushing off his question about her day. Jake didn't push. Mia's job demanded long hours, and he trusted her to balance it. But that night, as they sat on the couch, her phone buzzed relentlessly, each notification pulling her further away. She typed quick replies, her fingers moving with a focus Jake hadn't seen in their conversations lately. The shift was subtle. Mia's sticky notes became less frequent, her laughter a little less bright. She'd always been purposeful, but now her energy seemed directed elsewhere, toward work or something Jake couldn't quite name. He chalked it up to stress, maybe a big project deadline. They'd weathered busy seasons before. Still, he caught himself watching her more closely, noticing how she'd lock her phone screen when he entered the room, how her stories about work now revolved around a new project lead named Ryan. "He's got this wild idea for streamlining code," she'd say, her voice carrying a spark Jake hadn't heard in a while. Jake didn't dwell on it, at least not at first. Trust was their cornerstone, and he wasn't the type to let fleeting doubts erode it. He buried himself in his own work, securing a new client contract that kept him up late, tweaking firewalls and debugging scripts. Mia's late nights matched his, their loft quieter than it used to be. But every so often, he'd find her smiling at her phone, a private kind of smile that didn't include him. He'd brush it off, telling himself it was nothing, that they were fine. They had to be. One evening, as they prepped dinner, Jake chopping peppers, Mia stirring a pot of soup, She mentioned a tech conference in San Francisco. It's a big deal, she said, her eyes on the stove. They're encouraging spouses to join for the networking dinner. Her tone was casual, but there was a pause, a flicker of something unspoken. Jake offered to go, expecting her usual enthusiasm. If you want, she said, not meeting his gaze. The words landed heavier than they should have, a tiny fracture in their rhythm. Mia used to insist he come to these events, saying he kept her grounded. Now, it felt like he was inviting himself into her world. That moment stayed with Jake, a quiet whisper of unease. He didn't know it then, but it was the first step toward a truth he wasn't ready to face. Their life, so carefully built, was about to test the strength of its foundations. And Jake, who thought he'd found everything he wanted, was about to learn what happens when trust begins to slip. The San Francisco conference had left a fracture in Jake and Mia's rhythm, a subtle crack that widened back in their Seattle loft. The hum of Capitol Hill streets couldn't drown out the quiet that settled between them. Mia's laughter, once a constant in their home, now belonged to her phone, her fingers dancing across the screen with a focus Jake hadn't seen in their shared moments. Her chamomile tea sat cold most mornings, her eyes locked on notifications, her replies to Jake clipped. "Work's crazy," she'd say, brushing off his questions, her smile a shadow of what it used to be. Jake wanted to believe it was just stress, a phase they'd weather like always. But the name Ryan, her project lead, echoed in her stories, his ideas, his humor, his presence weaving into their life like an uninvited guest. Mia's distance grew sharper. Her phone, once left open on the counter, now stayed face down, its screen locking the moment Jake entered the room. She'd started wearing bold lipstick again, a deep shade she hadn't touched since their early dating days, and her outfits were sharper, tailored for something beyond the office. Jake complimented her one morning, hoping to bridge the gap. "Thanks," she muttered, already out the door, her mind elsewhere. The loft, once their haven, felt like a stage where they played roles. Jake, the supportive husband, Mia, the distracted star. Their bike rides along the Burt Gilman Trail had stopped, their Friday jazz nights replaced by her late hours at work. "Team drinks," she'd say, coming home past 10, her perfume mixed with the faint scent of wine. Ryan's name became a drumbeat. Ryan recommended this podcast. Mia said over dinner, her eyes on her phone. "Ryan's got this wild plan for our project." Jake's stomach tightened, but he nodded, swallowing the unease. He told himself it was nothing. Work friendships were normal, and Mia was ambitious. But one evening, he caught her taking a mirror selfie in the hallway, angling her phone just right, only to find it deleted from her gallery later. "For work," she said when he asked, her voice too quick. The lie was small, but it stung, a pinprick in the trust they'd built over 5 years. The breaking point came with a work trip to Portland. Jake was set to fly out for a client pitch, a quick 2-day job. The night before, Mia barely noticed his packing, her attention consumed by a text thread. "Safe travels," she said, her eyes on her screen, her voice mechanical. Jake nodded, his chest heavy. At the airport, a storm grounded his flight, the cancellation alert flashing on his phone. He stood in the terminal, travelers grumbling around him, and felt a pull, not to call Mia, but to go home. Something, call it instinct, told him to see what happened when he wasn't expected. The drive back to Capitol Hill was quiet, the city's glow blurred by rain. Jake pulled into their driveway, just after dusk, Mia's car parked as usual. The loft's windows glowed softly, a familiar sight that should have felt like home. But as he stepped inside, his pulse quickened. Jazz hummed from upstairs, a slow, deliberate tune they used to dance to on lazy weekends. 2 wine glasses sat in the sink, one smudged with Mia's bold lipstick. A man's jacket hung by the door, unfamiliar, its presence a silent scream. Jake's breath caught, the air suddenly thick. He didn't call out. He didn't want to know. Not yet, but his feet moved, carrying him toward the stairs. Each step felt heavier, the hardwood creaking under his weight. The jazz grew louder, its notes wrapping around his racing heart. At the top, he turned toward their bedroom, the door slightly ajar. He pushed it open, and time stopped. Mia sat on their bed, inches from Ryan, their shoulders nearly touching, her laughter soft and private. A bottle of wine rested on the nightstand, 2 half-empty glasses beside it. The locket Jake had given her on their 3rd anniversary, once a constant around her neck, was gone. They were lost in their moment, oblivious to the world, until Mia's eyes met Jake's. Her laughter died, her face paling as if erased. "Jake, it's not what you think," she stammered, scrambling to her feet. Ryan froze, his hand dropping from the bed, his mouth opening but no words coming. Jake stood still, his gaze shifting from Mia to Ryan, then back. The air was thick with their guilt, the ease of their closeness a blade in his chest. "I see exactly what it is," Jake said, his voice low, steady despite the storm inside him. Ryan mumbled, "I'm sorry, man, but it was hollow, a reflex." Mia reached out, her hand trembling. "Jake, please." He didn't wait for her words. He turned, the jazz fading behind him as he walked down the stairs, past the wine glasses, past the jacket, out into the cold Seattle night. His car was still warm, the engine humming as he slid inside, his hands gripping the wheel. He didn't drive, not yet. He just sat, his breath fogging the windshield, the image of Mia's laughter burning in his mind. It wasn't just a moment. It was the months of distance, the deleted selfies, the private smiles. The trust he'd held so tightly had shattered, and with it, the life he thought they shared. Jake didn't scream or cry. He felt hollow, like the part of him that believed in Mia had been carved out. The loft, their haven, was no longer his. He drove to a motel in Tacoma, the neon sign flickering as he checked in, paying cash, no questions asked. His phone buzzed. Mia's calls, texts, voicemails piling up. He didn't read them. He powered off the device, the silence a small act of control. In the dim motel room, he lay on the stiff bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every missed sign. The truth was clear now, and it hurt more than he'd imagined. But beneath the pain, a spark flickered, not anger but resolve. Whatever came next, Jake knew one thing. He wouldn't let this moment define him. The Tacoma motel room was a stark contrast to the warm Seattle loft Jake once called home. Its flickering neon sign and humming mini fridge offered no comfort, only a mirror to the hollow ache inside him. The image of Mia, laughing beside Ryan in their bedroom, looped in his mind, each replay sharpening the sting of her absence. Her calls and texts flooded his phone, but Jake silenced them, powering off the device. The silence wasn't just an escape. It was a choice, a first step toward reclaiming himself. Trust had been the cornerstone of their life, but now, with it shattered, Jake faced a truth. He couldn't rebuild on broken ground. Yet, in that dim room, a spark of resolve flickered. He wouldn't let pain define him. He'd find a way forward, not through anger, but through clarity. Needing distance, Jake rented a cabin on the Olympic Peninsula, a quiet retreat nestled among towering evergreens and morning fog. The isolation was deliberate. No Wi-Fi, spotty cell service, just the whisper of wind through pine needles. At first, the stillness was unsettling, the absence of Mia's presence a weight heavier than her texts. He'd wake to the creak of the cabin, expecting her soft hum or the clink of her coffee mug, only to find solitude. But slowly, that solitude became a canvas. Mornings, he journaled, not about her, but about himself. Who he was, who he wanted to be. The words were clumsy at first, but they grounded him, each sentence a brick in a new foundation. The cabin's simplicity forced Jake to confront his pain. He'd sit on the porch, a mug of black coffee cooling in his hands, watching deer graze at dawn. The forest didn't care about his hurt. Its indifference was oddly freeing. One afternoon, he dusted off his old guitar, untouched for years, and strummed halting chords by the fire. The music wasn't perfect, but it was his, a reminder of passions buried under routine. He hiked the peninsula's trails, the crunch of gravel underfoot steadying his thoughts. On one walk, he helped a local fix a jammed laptop at a nearby cafe. Their shared laughter over tech wove a small bridge to the world. These moments, small, human, stitched it back together, thread by thread. But healing didn't mean ignoring the truth. Jake's cybersecurity skills, honed over years of untangling digital knots, became his tool for clarity. He audited their joint accounts, a routine check that uncovered a secret savings account Mia had opened, siphoning small sums over months. The discovery wasn't just financial. It was a confirmation of her detachment, a plan she'd built without him. Digging deeper, he traced late-night logins to her work laptop, suspecting she and Ryan were misusing company resources. The evidence was clear, but Jake paused. Exposing them could ruin her, and a part of him, the part that still remembered her sticky notes, hesitated. Was he seeking justice or revenge? The question gnawed at him, a moral crossroads under the cabin's slanted roof. One evening, as rain pattered on the windows, Mia arrived unannounced. Her knock was tentative, her eyes red when Jake opened the door. "I messed up," she said, her voice breaking. "Ryan pushed me into it. I'm so sorry." Her new watch, gleaming on her wrist, betrayed her, a purchase from her hidden account. Jake's heart hardened, not with anger, but with certainty. "You made your choice," he said, his voice steady. "Go." She lingered, pleading, but he closed the door, the click final. The encounter wasn't about her anymore. It was about him, about choosing truth over excuses. That night, he sat by the fire, the guitar silent, and made his decision. Justice wasn't about destruction. It was about accountability. Using his skills, Jake compiled encrypted evidence of Mia and Ryan's misconduct, budget discrepancies, unauthorized logins, and sent an anonymous tip to her company's ethics board. He didn't sign his name, didn't linger on the outcome. The act wasn't vengeance. It was a release, a way to let the truth speak for itself. He'd protected himself, securing his assets with a lawyer's help, ensuring his future wasn't tied to her choices. The cabin, once a refuge from pain, became a place of purpose. He sketched the hills by a nearby pond, the pencil scratch a quiet rebellion against despair. He fixed a neighbor's Wi-Fi, their gratitude a reminder of his worth beyond Mia's shadow. Weeks passed, and Jake felt the weight lift. He slept through the night, no longer haunted by the jazz or the wine glasses. The forest's rhythm, birds, wind, the distant bark of a dog, became his own. One morning, he found a photo in his journal, a selfie from a long-ago bike ride with Mia, her smile wide and real. He didn't tear it up. He tucked it away, not as a wound, but as a marker of how far he'd come. The locket he'd given her, missing that night in the loft, no longer defined his loss. He was building something new, not for her, not for them, but for himself. The cabin solitude had taught him a truth. Pain could break you, but it could also reshape you. Jake wasn't the man who'd walked into that bedroom anymore. He was stronger, clearer, rooted in his own worth. As he packed to leave, the forest seemed to nod, its branches swaying in approval. Whatever came next, whether in Seattle or beyond, he'd face it not as a victim, but as a man who'd chosen to rise. The whispers of doubt were gone, replaced by a quiet strength that felt like home. The Olympic Peninsula's fog had lifted, and with it, the weight of Jake's pain. The cabin, once a refuge from the shattered trust of his Seattle loft, had become a crucible for his transformation. The jazz, the wine glasses, the laughter of Mia and Ryan no longer haunted him. In their place was a quiet strength, forged through journaling, strumming chords, and walking trails that taught him resilience. Jake had sent the anonymous tip to Mia's company, not out of spite, but to let truth find its way. Now, as he packed his belongings, the forest seemed to hum with approval, its branches swaying as if to say, "You're ready." He wasn't the man who'd walked into that bedroom anymore. He was whole, rooted in his own worth, ready to step into whatever came next. 3 months later, the consequences unfolded. Mia's company investigated the encrypted evidence Jake had provided, uncovering that Ryan had inflated project budgets, with Mia complicit in funneling funds for personal gain. Both were let go, their reputations dimmed in the tight-knit tech world. Mia's text to Jake shifted from frantic apologies to quiet pleas, claiming she'd lost herself, that Ryan was a mistake. He didn't respond. Her words, once a lifeline, were now echoes of a life he'd left behind. Ryan sent a single message, a half-hearted, "I didn't mean for this to happen," but Jake deleted it without reply. Their choices had consequences, not because of him, but because truth has a way of catching up. Jake took steps to protect his future, working with a consultant to secure his assets and move forward. He sold the loft, its big windows and hardwood floors no longer a home, but a memory. With the proceeds, he relocated to Bellingham, a coastal town where the air was crisp and the pace slower. The move wasn't just geographic, it was a declaration. Bellingham's waterfront, with its fairies and sunset-gilded waves, felt like a fresh canvas. Jake launched a cybersecurity consultancy, his expertise now serving local startups and small businesses. He mentored young entrepreneurs at a community tech hub, sharing tips on firewalls and coding, their eager questions rekindling his passion. The work wasn't just a job. It was a purpose, a reminder that he could build without leaning on someone else's foundation. Evenings found Jake at open mic nights in Bellingham's cozy cafes, his guitar in hand, strumming melodies that carried his journey. The crowds were small but warm, their applause a quiet validation. One night, he helped a barista fix a glitching tablet, their shared laughter over tech quirks sparking a conversation that stretched past closing. These moments, helping, connecting, creating, wove him into the town's fabric. He wasn't chasing love or a new Mia. He was chasing himself, and for the first time in years, he liked who he was finding. Cleaning out the last of the loft before the sale, Jake found the locket he'd given Mia on their 3rd anniversary, its clasp broken, tucked in a drawer. It wasn't a wound anymore, but a marker, a reminder of the man who'd loved her and the stronger one who'd walked away. He kept it, not for her, but for himself, a symbol of lessons learned. Trust is precious, but self-worth is priceless. He tucked it into a box with old photos, closing that chapter without regret. The past had shaped him, but it wouldn't hold him. Mia, he heard, had moved to Portland, taking a lower-level job at a small firm. Her ambition, once a fire, was now a flicker, tempered by the consequences of her choices. Ryan faded from the scene, his name absent from industry circles. Jake didn't gloat or dwell on their downfall. Their paths were theirs. His was here, in Bellingham, where the salt air and community ties felt like a new kind of home. He didn't wish them ill. He wished them growth, the same growth he'd found in the cabin's silence and the peninsula's trails. One afternoon, Jake stood on a Bellingham pier, the sunset painting the bay in hues of gold and crimson. The water lapped gently, its rhythm steady, like the beat of his own heart. He thought of the loft, the sticky notes, the life he'd thought was forever. It hadn't been, but that was okay. Pain had broken him open, but it had also let light in. He'd learned to trust himself, to build a life not on someone else's promises, but on his own strength. The whispers of doubt of that night in the bedroom were gone, replaced by a truth he carried like a compass. Real strength comes from within, from choosing to rise, to create, to live. As he walked back to town, the pier's lights flickering on, Jake passed a community board advertising a local tech fair. He smiled, jotting down the date. He'd be there, maybe mentoring, maybe just listening, but definitely present. The future wasn't a plan. It was a possibility, one he'd meet with open hands. The locket, the loft, the life with Mia, they were part of his story, but not its ending. Bellingham's glow, the strum of his guitar, the faces of new friends, they were his now. And as the sunset faded, Jake knew he wasn't just surviving. He was thriving, free in a way he'd never been before.